You don't have an office?
No. I used to have a cubicle, but
Aren't you supposed to have an office?
no, I'm not that
What,
important.
now Iris's office is in the corner there.
Yeah.
Where the other fellow, where'd he go?
Who?
Well, he was in there with her. There was two of them.
Oh, Alan?
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Rick, you want to go ahead and get started? Well, we'd like to go ahead and get started with the Ogden Valley Plan Commission meeting for October 26, 2021, the pre-meeting. We've got 4 commissioners in attendance, and maybe 3 more will show up. I think Ron Lackey isn't coming for sure. I understand for those in attendance too might be interested, the Myers Subdivision has been tabled or taken off the agenda at least. I guess not tabled, but taken off the agenda until they redo something. So we will not be hearing item number 2. But we do have on the agenda 2 other consideration and action proposed amendment to the Snowbasin development agreement, and also the consideration and action on the zoning text agreement for mixed use zoning. So Steve, I guess you're going to be talking about Snowbasin tonight. Why don't you go ahead and give us a precursor of what's to come?
Yeah, hi. And I think they're on
I think they're on just via Zoom, or might show up a little bit later in person. I think there's quite a few of them that will be here. But the request is to amend, this will be the first amendment to the Snowbasin Development Agreement that was originally approved back in 2011. Since then, they haven't built really anything out that was on this plan. We've gotten a request to amend first of all, they want to change up their concept plan for Area A that we'll look at in more detail. And I'm sure that they'll be happy to explain to you the changes. But basically, we're looking at an amended concept plan for Area A. I don't know if I'd say amended, but maybe a more specific concept plan for Area A at Snowbasin. There are a few other changes. One of the requests from Snowbasin is to eliminate the cap on commercial density in the ski areas, which would be areas A and B. So that's one of the bigger changes. Let's see here. Another change that they're proposing is to allow the developer to amend their concept plan from time to time without requiring a full legislative action by the county commission. We're proposing to write some of that language in there. So we as staff are pretty comfortable with the proposed changes. The request to allow an amendment to each concept plan. The reason we're comfortable with that is because we understand they're not going to, I mean, it takes time to build out. As we've seen, it's been 10 years, they haven't built out anything. So we understand that, it's not going to follow each plan to the T. We understand that roads might need to change and, certain development types might need to move within areas. And so as staff, we're comfortable with that specific change that was proposed as well as other changes. One big takeaway is that there really isn't any density increase. They're not proposing to increase the number of units that they were originally given. So that's a pretty broad explanation of what's being proposed with this one. I'll answer any questions if you have any.
So no increase in density?
That's right. No, I would say no increase in the number of units. Now you could look at it and say that there is an increase in potential commercial density in areas A and B. They're proposing to eliminate the cap on the number of commercial units in those specific areas.
I'm curious why you count density in their commercial area. How does that happen that you have density there in commercial, but not at Powder Mountain and Wolf Creek or other places?
So when this development agreement was drafted, whoever drafted it and the county commission who approved it at the time approved it this specific way. And it was one unit is 5,000 square feet of commercial area, or vice versa.
Do you do that anywhere else in the county?
No.
Oh.
So back when this was done, I think the rules might have been written differently into the DRR1 zone back then, but currently they're not written that way.
Is there a reason to do it back then for a reason?
I don't know. I apologize. I would just be speculating, but I don't know the specific reason.
Any idea? Because another interesting way to look at this is how does Morgan County treat it? Because half of this is on their side and half on our side, right? Any idea how Morgan looks at their commercial?
I don't know.
Does anybody here from Morgan happen to know that? Charlie?
So what I took away from that is Morgan County doesn't limit the amount of commercial. That would be a multifamily dwelling.
So I'm wondering if they won't count lockouts now, they don't want room for increased density. I'm wondering multifamily dwellings, will they be able to send single family or was originally put up. So potentially all those single family dwellings be able to have an apartment in the basement also. Multiple numbers. Saying when it says no new density, that they're depending on what the answers are. Condos would be single families. Could have they want to have. It's about pretty much. That, please.
So I don't know that I can address it. I don't know that I fully understood the question. Maybe if we take it one question at a time. What was your first question?
So I wanted to know, I didn't see condos in the chart, and you mentioned that that would be considered as multifamily. Then.
Correct. So depending on the area, there's page 4 of 6 of the staff report. It shows how many units.
Multifamily units
So
are allowed.
per area or?
Maybe it was in the map. How many single family dwellings and how many hotel rooms and all. So, but I don't chart. I thought.
So if you look at page 4 of 6, that'll tell you the number of units proposed. So it actually shows you how each unit is counted in general, and then below that, total units per development area. So let me see if I can address your questions. So you want to know how many dwelling units are permitted?
Condos versus single family.
Okay.
Thought in the.
So the proposal is to have 1,529 single family, not single family, dwelling units. And that's specific to area A.
Okay, so they can be either or. It doesn't matter percentage, what the percentage is of single family or more.
That's right.
So could potentially the multifamilies have lockouts also? Are lockouts allowed?
So under if the current ordinance allows them to have, allows each one to have a lockout, then yes, yeah. There's nothing proposed to change with lockouts with this proposal.
It's in the master plan. It said though, if lockouts couldn't exceed the 10% traffic study, how much traffic it would generate. So that.
So one thing to consider is the DRR1 zone, which this is. It allows short-term rentals permitted. And so if somebody were to propose a single-family dwelling that had a basement in it, they could rent that out regardless. And so I don't know that that short-term rentals would really change anything with what's being proposed. But if you have like maybe a page number, I think that'd be good to look up, maybe even during the meeting, if you know which page that was on.
Sheet that I have on my phone, it's not. Just. Didn't seem that. Single family home, as much as they are now. So I'm just wondering how things have changed since this was
Good
originally.
question.
So I'm just thinking. That you wouldn't change situations.
Right. And so maybe the better way to say that is maybe the developer will say, explain that how they want to, but the total number of units is not increasing. Total number of units isn't increasing. Maybe just the way that they're calculated is changing. No, I don't believe walkouts have changed at all. Or
So it's just the way that hotel.
that's right. They would be a third of a unit, yeah. Which is how it's done at Powder Mountain currently.
monopolize. Some traffic. Of the increased number of people allowing. Changing the amount. that they, for. So potentially they can. So have they done a study to see how that would impact this?
They, to my knowledge, they haven't done that to see how it would be impacted. If typically those types of things would be requested at like a subdivision level, or even at maybe like a brand new resort would ask for that. Certainly is something that you could bring up in the meeting, but generally, if the county feels that a study is warranted, we'll ask for that usually at the subdivision level.
Just in the original master plan, it says that can't increase the percentage of generate more than 10% additional traffic. How it impacts the intersections and those types of things. So I'm wondering. Hotel rooms only to be counted as a third. So I'm wondering before we approved it, or if there needs to be stipulations before we approve that, so they can that study does.
It's a good thing to think about.
More is one. Even if it's something looks like I want to do it, but then you do it.
If I had to speculate, I would say that the planning commission or county commission in making that a requirement, or maybe even in Snowbasin making that, writing that in the agreement, they might want to see some commercial actually built out in order to give them units. But I wasn't there, and I mean the research that I've done, I haven't been able to actually find a specific reason for the 1 unit per 5,000.
Another question, if I may. On the employee housing, would there be any kind of stipulations put on that housing that could only be utilized by employees? How does that work? Is there usually some kind of a contract, something that runs with the property? Since that's not going to be counted as density, is there anything to? That's what it ends up being 100% used for.
Yeah, so it would be deed restricted, just to say, whoever, the only people that can live here are employees. And I suppose we could do like a title check to make sure that who owns it are employees. But I don't know that we would do anything more than just restricted to say, anybody who lives in these needs to be an employee, like a current employee.
Monitor that.
It's a good question. I don't actually know.
Usually as part of the subdivision, if they are proposing employee housing, we would require that on the plan. some type of restriction. We've got the deed restriction.
We could also, if you wanted to, recommend to the commission to write something into the agreement that says there will be, I know currently it says there are development reports that they have to give to us, every 2 years that explain all these things. And it might currently say, I don't know what it actually does, but it might say, give us your workforce housing development, also prove to us that whoever's living there are actually your employees.
And I have another question. This is because in the beginning, employees, and they went on condo, house. So would they? How does that really work out for it, do you know?
Typically, like in Park City, what I've seen is it's typically done in phases. And we have areas designated for that. Some of them have been more like fourplexes, threeplexes in through there. Some up there.
I would imagine that Snowbasin knows how many employees they need to run their operation. They've been there a while. And I'm sure they know how many units they need to house these employees. And so it's going to be limited. They're not going to be renting them out or something else. They need them for the employees. And I don't have a problem with that.
Tell me what, define lockout for me.
I can define it if you want, or if you want me. We're
Oh, just tell me quickly.
it's
What
a
is a
it's a
lockout?
it's a room that's separate from a unit that is able to have like a closed area that can be rented out for short-term rentals. So like in a multi-family dwelling, let's say someone has an apartment, there's going to be a lockout sleeping room where that person it'll have like a door that's able to be closed, and that it can be rented out.
Okay, this wouldn't apply in a hotel.
It could, yeah.
So a hotel room would have a lockout room.
It could. So there are some there are development agreements that we have that talk about lockout rooms in hotels. Yeah.
Can't picture it. Like adjoining hotel rooms, sometimes you can open the door between units and you rent both of them and you put your family in there. But that's not a lockout, that's two separate rooms.
And if you want, as we're having this, we can open up the current agreement and
Well, I'm just
see
curious what
exactly
the
what it
term
talks about. So
Commissioner Francis referred to.
In the master plan, it talks about long, but the number can't be, it's tied to the traffic that it would generate. Controlled increase against
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the Ogden Valley Planning Commission for October 26, 2021. Commissioners in attendance are Commissioner Torman, Commissioner Burton, Commissioner Schumann, Commissioner Howell, Commissioner Francis, myself, Commissioner Lewis, and Commissioner Lackey is absent tonight. Let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, also point out that item 2.1, the request for preliminary approval of the Myers subdivision got pulled off the agenda at the last minute. So I apologize if anybody made the trip for that. They just called us and canceled. So we'll likely see that another time and you'll be notified. So there's no minutes to approve and I don't think, right? Oh, there are. Oh, yeah, they're there. Okay, my apologies. Okay, so 3 different sets of minutes. Did everybody get a chance to review those? Any comments? That's awesome. Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the
July 27, August 24th, and October 20th. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, minutes pass. Okay, let's go ahead and do our first item of the night, ZDA 2021-2, consideration and action on a proposed amendment to the Snowbasin Master Plan and Development Agreement. Steve Burton will be presenting tonight. The applicant is Jim Hill. Thanks, Steve.
Yes. Commissioners, if it's okay, if you think it would be appropriate, what I'd recommend doing is having the owner present their changes to you, and then after that, I'll give you the analysis and the staff recommendation. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Commissioners, one thing I forgot to ask before we got started, does anybody have a conflict of interest or ex parte communications with the topics?
matter on this legislative.
Yeah, that's right. This is legislative.
So it
and
doesn't even
it
matter.
has, right, and it has been noticed as a public hearing as well, so you have to actually open up the public hearing.
Gotcha.
But it ultimately, it would be you'd be acting as a recommending body to the county commission.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners. Sorry for the delay here in our glitches. I'm Jim Hill. I think met with all of you before in the work session and then on the 20th on the field trip. Thank you for coming up. So our application here is about amending our development agreement that dates to 2011. And this is kind of our, our first time to actually move forward with that, with a development plan. So we have a conceptual plan for Area A that we're seeking approval on.
You just speak closer.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
need to be able to read.
Is this
Okay,
better?
I'm sorry. It's so tall.
So I think I'll just try to walk through. I believe in your packet you have sort of the details here and what's proposed in the amendment. We've had time to sort of discuss this previously. So I'll just kind of quickly talk through what the proposed modifications to the amendment are, and then it would be open for your questions if that's agreeable. I've got some of my colleagues and team members are here by Zoom. So Bill Five Ash with East West Partners, Riley Thiessen with EcoSign is also on with us by Zoom, and Ryan Caffey with Talisman Civil. So if there are any specific questions that need our master planner, our civil engineer, others, I do have some team members here remotely with us. So the first modification is asking for some flexibility in the language that relates to the land use plan. This is the exhibit from the existing development agreement. As you can see, there are areas A, B, F, and G that are in Weber County. Area A is the main base area. And as you can see from each of these exhibits, or each area on the exhibit, they show a conceptual road layout and conceptually where the development would go on each of these paths. We found as we've gotten into Area A specifically that these are kind of, I guess we view them as placeholders. As we've gotten into it and get into the detail, the road network, it's felt like it wants to go somewhere different. We've scooched things around. I'll show you the specific for Area A. If we look at this as an example, this is what we're actually proposing. And so we're wanting to sort of build that flexibility in for each area as we move forward, that we'd be able to move the road network within that area around. And we think that's sort of the kind of flexibility that was actually intended, but is not stated in the 2011 development agreement. These are the two area plans. So we have a full build out village concept plan for Area A. This is Earl's Lodge. So this is the existing center right now. This is the entry, Snowbasin Road. And then the second image here is our 2024 plan. So this includes Club Med Hotel up here, adding on to the existing facilities and starting a village base here, and scooching the road down to the kind of the very bottom of the resort and adding additional parking and an additional beginner ski area. And then the additional modifications requested. One is the way hotel rooms are counted. We're proposing that we remove a cap that's built into the language There's a 150 hotel room cap that doesn't seem productive to us for building a vibrant base area. And then the way the hotels are counted as density has seemed confusing to us. So we're proposing, this is similar to what's in Powder Mountain's development agreement, that a hotel be counted as one residential unit for every 3 hotel rooms. And then lastly, we restate clarifying and updating the density calculations. We're not intending here to ask for any additional residential units in terms of density, but we are asking to clarify that in the ski area, specifically areas A and B, that commercial space not be counted as density. We feel it's important to encourage those uses. They're economically challenged already, and so our request is that they not be counted as density, the commercial spaces only. Also clarifying that employee housing similarly would not be counted as residential density, again, to encourage that use. I think that's kind of the heart of it. There again is the Area A plan. So I don't know if you have questions for me or anything that we want to discuss, or any of our team members that we have present with us. Thank you for coming. It's nice to have you.
So if there, I do have a question on the hotel then. Basically, you could triple the amount of units in a hotel. And then you have the lockouts that could also really boost, that would triple the amount of lockouts you could also have theoretically. And then in addition, with employee housing, and then commercial not counting, just thinking theoretically that could generate a lot more traffic coming up to Snowbasin, which is a good thing. But I'm just wondering if a new traffic study should be considered, given in light of additional traffic that's going to be generated, even though it's, on paper it says no new density, but the changes that you're proposing would theoretically change the amount of density or amount of traffic coming up to there. And I'm just wondering how the old traffic study now fits in, especially now with traffic the way it is booming already.
We have updated our traffic study in the last few months, but just to address, as you were going through, we're not proposing like tripling the amount of hotel space. The way they were counted previously in the existing draft is, I think it's one unit for every 5,000 square feet. So 3 hotel rooms, if you think about it, just commonsensically, like with a residential unit, a home or a condominium, a 3-bedroom unit would be fairly common.
So that's usually, I mean, on average 15 by 12, so it would be about 160 square feet. I haven't done the math on it.
I guess for a hotel room, but the way it was counted, or that it's counted currently before the amendment, it's 1 residential unit per 5,000 square feet.
Mhm.
So as an example, it's a 150 room hotel. It previously was going to be counted as 43 units based on square footage. Under our proposed arrangement, it's going to be counted as 50 units. It's actually a little bit higher on the hotel count.
So you don't foresee it tripling then?
No, not at all. On that point. On the other points, I think your point is fair, that if we do have commercial space and these other uses and they're not counted, well, regardless of that, we have the obligation with traffic, and that this is part of the development agreement. We're not asking that it be amended. We do have the obligation at each step to be mindful and watching what's happening with traffic and impacts. And if we're causing, an issue that triggers needing an improvement to mitigate. So we'll acknowledge and agree that's in there. We've hired Fair and Peers. They did a study. They were out there last March. We do have a draft study that we could provide. I don't know that it's been fully finalized, but the result of it was, in the immediate term, there wasn't anything, there weren't any immediate improvements that were needed in terms of, say, a new traffic signal or a new lane or a roundabout or anything like that. At full build out, there are a number of things that are expected. I think there are about a half a dozen different traffic signals on Trappers Loop Road ultimately, and this would probably be, potentially decades into the future. But if we were to do full build out of what's entitled in both counties, there are, numerous improvements that are anticipated.
I do have another question. In the original agreement also, it talks about the different phases of development and the number of skiers that would generate. And I think that's full, correct me if I'm wrong, was it around 2,800 additional skiers at full build out in the original agreement? Do you see that the plans that you've made, that you're proposing, will change that number?
I don't recall seeing a skier number in there. Maybe I.
It's in one of the exhibits.
I don't know. That sounds low to me as we're doing planning and looking at the number of units and what we're trying to achieve in terms of activity. We're hoping to add, more than 2,800 skier, capacity.
And I think
there.
maybe that's what the old traffic study was based off of, those numbers is what I'm thinking. So
Huh. We could follow up on this. I don't know.
You.
Thank you.
I recall hearing in one of our meetings or reading that the intent of Snowbasin is to have visitors that would occupy the hotels, the condos and things, come and stay there. Could you, am I correct? Is that
Yeah.
a correct recollection?
We want to have offer overnight lodging and to have visitors come and stay. Absolutely.
So that would reduce the trips to and from Snowbasin for those people. You intend they would come, park the
Yeah.
car and stay for days.
Yes, and that's one reason in particular that we like the Club Med idea, because they bundle up their experience typically in a week-long experience, and frequently their guests would be coming in a bus or some other shuttle and staying there for a week, without even having a car, and staying for a week. So that's, yeah.
Okay. And likewise with the employee housing, how soon do you envision that employee housing being constructed?
Some of it would be included in the Club Med, and I don't want to present for them, but we know, in their planning work, they have a significant number of employee units built into their hotel plan. And that's just kind of how they operate. That's an important part of their business model, is a very personal connection with the guests. So that would be, I would anticipate that would be the first group of employees living up on the site. And then we have right here in the plan, we have an obligation in the development agreement, I think, for 29 employee housing units minimum. We haven't gotten into details or specifics of phasing or exactly when we do that, but we are having, actually we're talking about this yesterday in a meeting. It's attracting employees is particularly challenging right now. I think just throughout the economy, most of us are are feeling this, and the ability to house somebody is a big deal. So it's something we're mindful of, and it's kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of operating the resort in many ways.
And the commercial that you plan there would be to service all these people that are coming and staying.
Yeah,
So it's
right in this
more like
area,
creating a little city here.
little.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just to maybe put this in context. This is the existing Earl's Lodge on the map, and we're planning to start the first couple of buildings here. And again, this is early and conceptual. But if we were to have those two buildings with the ground floor being commercial space, order of magnitude, that might be 45,000 square feet. And we feel like that's enough to have some variety, to have a variety of dining experiences, maybe some other outfitters, more activities, some shops, some convenient stuff. So however you would think of 45,000 feet, maybe it's not quite a city, but we want it to be a village. We want there to be enough there that you could come and have like a week's worth of experience. Some of that will be between activities we have here and also the Club Med. So we're envisioning there will be some crossover between those two, but that would be our hope.
Thank you.
Quick question. It's completely different, but for instance, in Park City, and a lot on people coming just there to visit and recreate, to support them economically too. And I think that's usually a target, for, especially in the summer, and it's not ski season. So I would think this village would want to make it enticing also for other customers to come up from the local community or outside communities, just as people travel.
Absolutely.
As we go to Park City to go do some of the fun things that they do. So
Those
assuming you're
are
counting
absolutely
on
some of
that.
our goals.
Yeah.
Totally. We want it to be 4-season, work through the summer, have there be activities for locals, destination visitors, everybody.
And that's already part of the plan currently. That Snowbasin depends on weddings and other events and concerts and those types of things. So, do we know? Wasn't able to get in it. Didn't have time to get in it enough to see if that was part of the original plan. If that the traffic study took that into consideration. The old traffic study. Do we know?
Usually traffic studies take into consideration all the elements through the year and potential traffic events again.
And there was a village concept in the other one.
Definitely.
My question is a little bit more for the county, and I guess if you can help answer it. The previous, the amendment to commercial, one for every 5,000. I would really like to have that kind of explained, what the handicaps are as it is currently, what you would like, what it is that's holding you back. I'd like it for everyone to hear kind of what it is that you currently see as an issue with the plan as drawn. You would like to push and what you're trying to say. See, I'd like you to help explain that. For example, the development of the development will diminish as development occurs at a rate of one unit per one residential lot, and at a rate of 1 unit per every 5,000 square feet of commercial space development. I would really like to have that explained. Can you please help me?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, which paragraph again are you referencing? Is it 5?
Section 5.3 of the current development agreement, I'd like to, which is what you're requesting to be amended. I'd like to have you explain what the concerns are. I mean, obviously the blaring, I'd like to have more density in those, but please explain the 1 unit for every 5,000 square feet. What does that mean that, how's that handicapping you? What is that telling us that it's holding, how's that holding you back? That's part of my concern. What is that, what is it that we're trying to accomplish with the updated? In terms of commercial? Separate.
So with the commercial and the one residential unit per 5,000 square.
I believe it's one commercial unit for every 5,000. That's what I'm trying to understand. Is this stating one commercial unit for every 5,000 or 5,000 square feet of commercial do I get residential? What is,
I believe it's the latter.
Yeah, it is the latter.
for every house we build? Or if I do it,
So it would go against the density that you have, if you look down under area A, Earls Village, where it has 1,579, it would go against that. So that would take away one. Does that make sense?
count as one.
Correct.
Shops. It's not. Conference room.
So from our pre-meeting, there was some discussion, why have that at all?
Within your purview as part of the development agreement, you can look at, modifications.
Which goes to my question, what if that holds you back? Proposed adjustment. G, but not.
So actually what we're proposing is that the commercial density does count in the non-ski areas. So F and G are the ones, G is the one adjacent to Huntsville. F is the one next closest to that. And there we felt like leaving that limitation in place was appropriate. Because they're not, it's just hard to get commercial to go in a ski location. It's very seasonal. The economics of building on the mountain are expensive. And that's where, again, we wanted to encourage commercial by, removing the limitation on it. But only in the ski areas, not in the other areas, because it struck us as appropriate that there be a limit, say closer to Huntsville, somewhere that's going to be more of a year-round, naturally a year-round location.
So up on the mountain in the Snowbasin area, for example, in this first section where the parking lots are now, you're wanting to kind of eliminate the commercial and residential restriction for density and maintain it as we get closer to the valley. So maintain the restrictions of one unit diminishes per 5,000 density as you get closer to the Ogden Valley area.
Yes.
Steve, do you have anything you want to add to any of that? Just in general? Okay.
No, in the Reinvestment Covenant, and at that time, apparently legislation that wouldn't allow to force you to do offsite funding, for instance, of conservation easements on the valley floor away from the resort. And I assumed ever was changed the plan, it talked about they wanted to see if they could pursue changing that so they could restrict covenants on property down in the valley. Wondering if Snowbasin would still be interested in doing that voluntarily. Agreement. Original development.
I have seen, I know there
Number
is a,
7.
I don't have the terminology here, but a
Conservation.
reinvestment.
Conservation, yes.
Yeah.
A reinvestment
Well,
fee covenant.
I think there's actually a couple of subjects here that you bring up that are obligations in the development agreement. One is the conservation easement, like on the mountain. And so there's an exhibit about open space. And again, I don't have all the details, but in concept, within Weaver County, I remember when we looked at the exhibit, about 80% of the overall land area was to remain as open space. Some of that with a conservation easement on it, not all of it. I want to say it's about 30%. I know there's an exhibit. We can track down the details of that. But my impression is that as we're developing, let's make up an example. If we start with a first, say, 10 acres that we're developing, it's about 1.5 times that would then go into a conservation easement. So in this example, 10 acres get developed, 15 acres get a conservation easement put on them. And then some of it is more kind of general open space. And again, we could explore this further with staff so that we all understand what the technicalities are. Now, that's envisioned, I think, being on property that we own, that's on the mountain. And so we're aware of that. We don't have all the mechanics in place yet, but we're planning on that. Then the reinvestment covenant, I believe is a 1%. But almost like a transfer fee that when real estate sells in the future and over time, that this would provide a funding mechanism. Exactly what that gets used for at this point, I don't know. I believe something did get reported already on the on all the land. I'm sorry, that like creates that obligation, that expectation also for purchasers that there will be essentially a 1% tax. And then exactly how those funds get used at this point, candidly, we hadn't gotten that far down the road. I was not aware that there was like an expectation that those funds would go to conservation easement in the Ogden Valley, but
It mentions the valley floor.
I guess that's sort of somewhat new to me, but we're jumping on here kind of 10 years after the original intentions and all, and I think certainly open for discussion on that.
I felt my hands are a little bit tied. Seeing that general agreement earlier. Just going through that, it's been really interesting to see how those changes might interact with that. So
Yeah. I don't
questions.
think, I can't think off the top of my head how anything that we're proposing directly impacts any of those commitments or that we've made or obligations. I'm not asking to change any of those points, but as you can tell, after 10 years and now kind of like turning the ignition on, we're kind of learning how to do this. So.
Okay, well, why don't we come back to the commissioners? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. I don't think we have to take a vote on that. I just open it. Is that correct?
We would need to do a hearing, public hearing.
Public hearing. Okay, well, I'll accept a motion to open a public hearing. Do I have a motion? Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's open the public meeting. For anybody in attendance or online, let's start with those in attendance. If you'd like to come forward and state your name and where you're from and keep it to 2 minutes, we'd appreciate your comments on this. Is there anybody here tonight who'd like to speak? Mr. Gleason.
Evening. Thank you. Ron Gleason, unincorporated Weaver County, Eden. I was involved with some of the original discussions back in 2010, 2011. Snowbasin was nice enough to have a small group of citizens involved. What I recall, really got to go back to understanding all the transfer of units off the valley floor, particularly at Windsor Beach, and how much time was spent understanding not just the number of units, but also the impact. And when you look at the bonus density, which is upward of 60%, that's where some of these things such as one development unit per 5,000 square feet of commercial came in. So it's going to put 5,000 square feet of commercial in, was deeded a certain amount of impact of people getting there, water, wastewater, air, and that type of thing, formula that came about because of that. And there is a table in one of your handouts which goes through some of the formulas in there, the TBU, TMUs, and these type of things. So these are some of the offshoots that came out of that. For me personally, I believe that there is an increase in density that's being asked for here. When you read the wording carefully and when you listen to Mr. Hill, it specifically says they're not requesting additional residential density, which is true, but they are requesting density in the area of commercial and the area of employee housing. Employee housing, currently there is employee housing on the mountain. It's been there for a number of years. And while it says it just be seasonal, in the past, there are employees that live there year round. So I would, again, question that and understand that very carefully. And I believe that employee housing should be counted as part of the density because they will take up resource, again, water, wastewater, traffic. When you live at a resort, some people I know who live there, they want to get out of the bubble. I'm going to back up and just full disclosure, I've been a seasonal employee for Snowbasin for the last 12 years as a member of the ski patrol, but I am here representing myself and just representing my thoughts, nothing to do with the resort. So again, I think employee housing, it's important that that gets included because it's very, very similar to a residential unit. Little bit of a angle here, but on the 27th of September of this year, Snowbasin submitted a design review to the county to put 5 yurts permanently in the base area, just off of the Olympic finish area. They're going to have parking, they're going to have water, going to have wastewater, going to have power and everything brought there. So my question is, are these yurts, and this is the staff, are these yurts going to be counted as part of the development units? They're hotel-like, they're being rented year-round. Seems like the exact same thing as a hotel, so I'd like to get clarification as whether they're going to be counted. A comment, again, I did attend the work session. I did read the minutes of the meeting for your on-site session. There was a gentleman by the name of Bill from East West Partners that talked about sustainability. Talked a lot about building and a lot about heated and cooling. One thing I'd like to point out for everyone here, especially Bill, one of the things that Ogden Valley looks at as sustainable is dark skies. I want to make sure that they're aware of that. I'd like to make sure that they embrace that. But also a question for staff, when you read the lighting ordinance, when you make changes to facilities and to buildings, and that it is a requirement for all other buildings and all other parts of the facility to be brought up to code. My question is when they start their build out and the hotel for 2024, will the rest of the resort have to come into compliance with lighting, or is it going to be treated on an area by area basis, area A, area B, area G, that type of thing? Question I have. I think it's really important to understand that. Going back to some other specifics, some of the changes, development agreement 5.3 has a cap on the amount of commercial density and the amount of retail density, and it looks like they are asking for that to be removed completely, so they can build whatever they want. So I understand the flexibility, but again, my point is they are bringing density, whether it's commercial or not, again, which is going to increase traffic, increase water, wastewater, and those types of things. And one other question I had for the petitioner. Back in 2011, when the whole plan was put together, and again, the number of open houses at Snowbasin, one of the objectives and things they stated was
they wanted to have a majority of the day users enter the resort on the Strawberry side. That's over in Morgan County. I understand we're not dealing with that. But in order for the village to work, in order for the traffic study and everything to work, a large percentage of the day users were going to enter on the Strawberry side. So my question is that still the objective? And if so, or if it's changed and all that, how does that impact what they're looking for here for doing the village and all the changes in traffic patterns? And that's it. Thank you for your time. I appreciate all your work.
Thank you. Anybody else here? Okay, is there anybody online who would like to speak to this? You can put an emoji up, or looks like Jace. Can we let him on or? Who's moderating tonight, by the way?
I'm just showing Kirk Langford with that raised hand.
Okay, let's go to Kirk then.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you, yeah, thank you for letting me make a comment. So I would just like to go back, first of all, and thank the people that are at Snowbasin now for the interest and the commitment they made to involve the community when this resort plan was first put together. And they were so inclusive of the members of the community, and we had work meetings with the county commissioners attending each session. I think the resort zone even won some praise as an excellent plan, and by being called out by planning associations. And I'd just like to step back and say, I think it's a really good plan. One of the parts of that plan that Ron pointed out was development rights went to commercial, and we ended up at 5,000 square feet. It started out much lower than that, and there was a lot of conversation about that. And I think at one point, Snowbasin probably would have gone for the 3,500 per TDR. There was also a lot of discussion about lockouts, and each of those lockouts representing some portion of a transfer development right. So I would just caution you to balance the needs of the new Snowbasin regime now with taking red tape off their back with the commitment we had to be growing in an excellent way in the past and not over stressing the resource up there. I think Snowbasin is a lot like a national park. You want people to be there, but you also, it's also a very precious resource. And I think the plan that got put together at the time was really good. And I'm not sure that it's something that really needs to be changed now. I think that you guys on the planning commission really need to think about that. But also, like, I make a comment that Shanna brought up. There was kind of a handshake agreement with Clint Enzyme and some of the others in the family that he represented there at that time, that any kind of 1% at that time was called real estate transaction fee, but I think the state legislature didn't like that terminology. That, everyone kind of, there was a consensus, and you could check back with some of the Snowbasin people that were on board at that time, that would be used as a funding mechanism for open space in the valley floor, because that amenity of a different type of community is something that helps to differentiate Snowbasin's product from Beaver Creek or Vale or some of these other areas where the density in the communities are so high, and it really makes for a nice visitation to Snowbasin. And rather than having a neighbor like Riverdale, it would have a neighbor like you see somewhat now, although development's going to go gangbusters in Ogden Valley, it can still go gangbusters in a good way. So I really would like to also suggest you go back to that 1% real estate transaction fee whatever the new name's going to be. And you can kind of confirm what I'm saying, that originally that was the purpose of what that money would be spent for, rather than say trails or other types of parks. There was a lot of discussion with that. So just in summary, think about that 1% real estate transaction fee, do a little research on that. The plan we had was pretty darn good. It's nice to take the red tape off a little bit, but it's also nice to take care of the resource up there and have it blend in with the valley. Thank you for what you're doing and appreciate a minute to take a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langford. Do we have anybody else? It's like Jace. Oh,
I don't see
Yeah.
any other.
that's funny. Okay, anybody else? Okay, let's go ahead and make a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, say aye. Hey, public meeting is closed. The additional questions for Steve from commissioners, or you can answer the question. maybe.
Sure. And I just want to say that I'm not prepared. I don't think Snowbasin is prepared to answer every single question that somebody has about their entire development agreement and master plan tonight. What we're focusing on is really just what is being changed. So like the reinvestment fee, nothing's proposing to change with that. But I'm not able to talk to you about that in depth, probably in the level that you want tonight. But if you'd like, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about that, I guess, separate from this meeting, separate from these changes. I think the same goes for a few of the other questions, although I think they're really valid from those individuals who spoke. Lighting, for example, that'll be something that we'll have to address as development happens. But again, nothing's proposing to change with lighting here. Now I understand that the ordinance, the original development agreement, we didn't have dark sky requirements in the Ogden Valley. So I get why that was brought up, but regardless, it's still an ordinance and it will need to be brought into compliance at some point up there. So, and I would just say that to a few of the other questions. I mean, we certainly can, if you'd like, get into the weeds a little bit, but I really just kind of wanted to focus on what was being proposed by the developer at this point. One thing I'll do that might be a little bit helpful, we talk about density, is share my screen here. So Commissioner Schumann brought up a good point. I think just a general point. I mean, the question of density, I think it's confusing to everybody. And I think that's why there is a proposed change to kind of clarify what exactly is going on. What I'm showing you is it's an original exhibit from the current development agreement, of the original development agreement, that shows how density is calculated. And unless you kind of sit and look through this for, I think the other day I was looking at it for a few hours, trying to make sense of it. It's pretty hard to understand. I don't know why they did it this way back then, because it's not easy to understand. But if you look, there's residential density and then there's commercial density. So that there was a question about commercial density, which I think needs to be answered. So if you look over in commercial A, which is the area that we've talked about quite a bit tonight, it's the area that's going to be developed first, the hotel. We're talking about number of residential units. We're also talking about over here on the right, a number of commercial units. So what I did is I just got my calculator out to make sure that I did this right. If you look at 213,750 square feet, that's how many square feet was envisioned to be commercial square feet. When you divide that number by 5,000, you get this, it's 42.75, I think is what it is. So they apparently rounded up and said area A will have 43 commercial units. So that's how it was originally calculated. As to why, I don't know. I would be happy to do some research into that and maybe get a better answer for you. I guess maybe separate from this meeting. But that's how it was calculated. So you can see again, commercial area A, this is how much square feet was anticipated, which would be this equivalent of commercial units.
I mean, isn't the 150, hotel rooms in that area, it would still count as 50. So you're really just going from 43 to 50. You're not just getting rid of 43.
That's correct. And if you look at area A, there was actually planned to have 150 hotel units before anyway.
And that doesn't change the total numbers much.
Right.
It's not disappearing, it's just being added up differently.
So I just wanted to bring that up. I think the intent ultimately is to just make sense of this. Although I don't know that we've really done that. But I want to go over. Let's see, maybe I'll stop sharing here. And is now good? Like, do you want to ask me questions right now? Do you want me to give you the staff recommendation on all these changes?
I had a quick question
Yeah.
for you on the 0.33 for the hotel room.
Yeah.
Is there a maximum amount of units or square footage for hotel space that's in the agreement? Because I guess I'm just thinking like density wise, if it's 0.33, they could in theory, you could essentially build more hotels because it's counted as a lesser density and get rid of some of the multifamily dwellings. And it takes up a bigger footprint because it's that matrix you just showed us. That's a pretty big footprint of that hotel. So with an increased density count or a decreased density count. In the development agreement, is there a certain amount of hotel rooms that are allowed, I guess?
So currently, in the current one, yes, it specifies the number of units per area. We were just looking at area A.
Okay.
That's about 150.
All in the master plan.
Yeah, let me share that screen again here. So right now, under the existing development agreement, this is area A, and it does break out the density a little bit for you there. I don't know if you can see that. Hotel units 150, multifamily 399. And then I actually area A technically, and there may be some interpretation differently from the developer, but area A appears to me to be really the only area that would actually have hotels.
In the development agreement, is there allowances? I guess if you change the development agreement, to modify it.
They could, yeah. And I have an exhibit here I'm going to share that shows you really exactly what they're proposing. Let me scroll through these pages real quick here.
I don't think that's their intent. I just am trying to, like, if you change something and it can affect something down the road,
Absolutely.
but whatever decision we make now.
So here's what's being proposed here. We've got a table here, and we have, and I just took this from their. Oh, you can't see. You can't see. Let me see. Let me have to reshare. Okay, so they had a PDF, and I just kind of made my own table that showed what they were proposing. So at the top here, you've got how a unit is counted. And then below that, we're saying this is the total number of units per development area. So under this proposal, yes, if you take area B, for example, some of those 502 units, if the developer came in and said, we would like to change our concept plan for area B, I'm not saying that they are, I'm just saying theoretically, if they wanted to change area B concept plan, which currently doesn't show any hotels, if they wanted to show that have hotels, 500, and if it were approved, you could say, yeah, some of these 502 units could be hotel units. And I guess we just have to divide that, right, by 3, whatever that number is. Right. Absolutely. So part of that is we go to one of the changes here in what I wrote in the staff report is actually changing. So currently, section 3 of the development agreement says this. I'll just read it. Weber County shall retain the right to approve or deny more specific / detailed conceptual development plans for areas A, B, F, and G. The concept development plans shall be approved prior to or in conjunction with the first application for site plan / subdivision approval within each development area. What they want it to say is they want to allow some flexibility in what these areas look like. So I'm going to read what they want it to say. They still want it to say what I just read, but they want to add something to it. So I'll start again. They want it to say this. Weber County shall retain the right to approve or deny more specific / detailed conceptual development plans for areas A, B, F, and G. The concept development plans shall be approved prior to or in conjunction with the first application for site plan / subdivision approval within each development area. Adding this language. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the developer and county acknowledge that the land use plan is provided for in Exhibit B to the agreement. Subsection I, one is conceptual in nature and may be further refined by the parties. And 2, that specifics regarding locations of roads, building areas, and product types may be moved within the areas generally depicted as A, B, F, and G. Unit density for each area, A, B, F, and G, is fixed and may not be transferred between areas. Concept development plans for each area are expected to evolve and be presented in phases in the context of a more detailed master plan for each area. County approvals for these concept development plans will typically be handled at the staff or planning commission level and will not require amendment of the development agreement or land use plan. So I think that gets right at the heart of what Commissioner Torman is talking about. So I guess the question is there enough, does the county have enough trust in Snowbasin to come up with these more detailed plans? Even if we don't, we as staff, so it would either be the planning commission or the planning director would be able to make these changes. So if they said, you know what, we don't want this much residential anymore in area A, the planning staff, our response to that would be, okay, well, you're probably going to need to amend your concept plan because that's not what your concept plan shows. For example, area B doesn't show any hotels. If they said they wanted hotels, we would say amend it. We would likely take it before the planning commission. The intent is that they don't want to have to go through an entire legislative process to make these changes, but there would be some review.
Clarification. Speaking of density, part of this could be my inexperience. Explain. Basically try and control. So speaking in terms of hotels, retail shops, whatever it may be.
separation between. Separately. 75, 80, it's commercial, then, so it's like, hey. 50 or where we're getting. Area A is rather big and seems to include lots of different. Just hotel. Clarification on what it is that we're handing. We obviously need hotel. You know, what does that mean? What is it that we're trying to do? My question, right? Or than just a hotel. By what we're getting at with this removal of commercial that's tied to square footage.
So you're, just to reiterate your question, you want to know why the change is needed?
Concern for 1 unit for 5,000.
Yeah.
One unit for 5,000. Windsurfer Beach in commercial units. Know a little bit more about that information. It's attractive land, Windsurfer Beach. I don't know what the related to and why they put that in the plan. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is if we're going to change that tied in the original plan, what is the concern? Push it forward.
Yeah, so there aren't, when this was developed in 2011, we didn't have any other like destination resorts in the Ogden Valley, at least not zoned that way. So nothing was zoned to give this much density back then. And so again, I don't know why they said 5,000 square feet equals 1 unit. I'm certain, like I said, I'm happy to maybe find out the reason why, but you're wondering what.
You know, what does that cause an issue?
And I'll say you're referring to Snowbasin. I'm happy to explain what we think that means as staff. We don't see a need to limit residential units. We don't see the need to say, okay, you're over your
commercial unit.
Sorry,
Separate
I meant to say
commercial.
commercial. We don't. Let me go back. We don't see a need to limit the number of commercial units or even track them, because we feel like in order to have people up there and have people staying up there, it's going to need to be vibrant, and they're going to need to be able to go to commercial shops and get what they need. And so we just don't see a need to track it. And I think that's what Snowbasin's thought is as well.
Which goes to my question, maybe the gentleman that addressed it, brought it up, can help explain why that was put in. What was the concern? You know, what was the commercial concern back then? Sure to have put that in.
Can I chime in here? I don't know what it said back in 2010 or 2011, but the county code currently in the DRR1 zone, it does say that when you're calculating the maximum permitted units, that is.
Let's see clear, when you say maximum units, are we talking hotel commercial? Are we talking just commercial? Is there a separation?
Units period. It says the maximum number of permitted units shall diminish as development occurs at a rate of 1 unit per 1 residential lot or unit developed, and a rate of 1 unit for every 5,000 square feet of commercial space developed. Commercial area within hotel lobbies and conference rooms or facilities are excluded from this calculation. That's in our county ordinance. So the default is based on our ordinance 1 unit for every 5,000 square feet of commercial, that is the way you calculate how the commercial development there impacts the number of development units that they have a remaining entitlement for. So that's based in our code. I don't know if it was 10 years ago or not, but so the parts that they are leaving that way would still comply with the code. They're asking for a deviation from that code requirement in doing this amendment, but also a deviation from the original agreement. There is flexibility in the code in a situation like this to approve alternative development standards in this type of development. So it is legal to deviate from that, but I kind of wonder if that may answer part of the question as to why that was in there in the first place. Maybe it was because it was part of the county code and nobody, and I don't know if they didn't propose changing that or if the county commissioners wanted to leave it in there. I'm not sure.
So now I guess part of my question too, if I have 5,000 square feet of commercial, 5,000 square foot hotel, I can put as many hotel rooms in that as I want. That counts as 1 unit of density. How I'm reading
I don't read it that way. I think we're saying your hotel rooms count. They're 0.33 of your units. You only have so many units.
it's in the proposed. Right? Is that density? So that kind of, so if it's 1-to-1 currently, I guess I'm totally confused here.
And-
Sure.
Yeah, and I can see how you could think that this means that they can have as many units as they want, but it doesn't. They're still tied to the number of units that was originally.
If I build a store or a retail front, 5,000 square feet, I can have 10 stores at 500 square feet. Or I can have 1. I mean, what do we get? What is this?
You don't get more residential units.
Those aren't residential uses, those are commercial units.
Yeah.
That could be just in square footage.
Right.
Stores,
So we,
like individuals.
When you look at commercial, that is changing. When you look at the table, in area A and B, it does not count towards the density. So that is changing with that, whereas in areas F and G, that is staying the same.
so is there a
We would have a requirement that says that. Here, hey, much as you want.
And if you don't feel comfortable with that, you can make that a requirement, a recommendation to look at having the 5,000.
I want to understand. Yes, too.
Yeah.
I'm saying 5,000 square feet of hotel space. That's 5,000 square feet is limited on the rooms. I can put it as I want.
How the code reads is it's just the rooms, it excludes the lobby and conference rooms.
Have 10 units square feet in that one. Then why ask for the extension? Oh, they did put it 150. It's kind of my.
Maybe I could just say, so currently if it's 5,000 square feet and you could, it only counts for one thing. But what if they go put 20 hotel micro units in that 5,000 square feet? Okay, they can do that now. What they're proposing is counting every hotel room as a third. So they're actually making it harder on themselves in that case. But when you do the math, I think it's almost the same, whether if it's hotel rooms at a third, you hit about 50 in that math. And if you do 5,000 square feet, you hit about 47 or whatever. So I don't think the hotel room math changes much. It does change on the commercial though. So now it's like, okay, well, yeah, let's say you have 100,000 square feet of commercial. Is that, 20, whatever the math is that 20 things or is that 200 things? So I don't think anything changes except the commercial. And now we're not saying how big those stores need to be. And, personally, if you guys think it makes sense.
Is that defined as a store?
Well, it doesn't matter however many times you chop it up, but it doesn't matter how many front doors. Now we're talking commercially. It's just every 5,000 square feet takes away from one of their totals. So at the end of the day, they're going to come up with what combination of stores make economic sense to them. And they probably don't know, you know, maybe it's a bunch of little ones, maybe it's 4 big anchors. But either way, it's counted at 5,000 square feet a unit. I just don't think at the end of the day, it changes much. You might have more smaller things, you know, and maybe that's a bigger impact. That's possible. But the hotel seems to be about the same.
I think according to the rules of construction, Counselor can correct me. If you separately specify hotel rooms and commercial as 2 separate items, they can't be the same. You can't say, I got this commercial square footage, therefore I can ignore hotel room definition and move it into commercial. They're 2 separate things.
Unless one were included within the other. If hotel were defined one way, but it were included in commercial, you'd be able to count it toward commercial. But if they have totally separate, different definitions and they're not
You say
included,
you can only have hotel rooms as this density and commercial is defined as something else. You can't say, okay, let's take our 5,000 square feet of commercial and throw a bunch of hotel rooms in there and get around the restriction on density with 0.33 per.
okay, so you're saying 2 specific but different definitions.
Yeah.
Right, that would be, you'd use the one that applies to that.
So if there's a fear we're going to increase hotel rooms by having commercial, I don't think it's a concern. I think it would be, and the staff can tell me how they'd interpret that. It seems pretty clear. Hotel rooms, this is what you got to do if you want to have a hotel room. And commercial is other stuff. And if you have lots of, I'm thinking of a mall. When you get one of those little things where you have an island out there in the hall, a kiosk. Well, that makes sense to me to count that as, okay, 1 commercial density. If you have 10 500 square foot kiosks, well, okay, there's 1 commercial density.
And commercial use is defined in our county code as an occupation, employment, or enterprise that is carried on for profit by the owner, lessee, or licensee. So it's a pretty broad, basic definition, but yes, if hotel unit entitlements are defined in a certain way, then that's what you would use. And so the question, I think, from Commissioner Schumann has been, why do they want this change? Why not just leave hotel within the overall commercial? Is that what you've been asking?
I think Commissioner Lewis pretty nailed it, right? Like basically they're asking for something a little bit harder on themselves. And there's, so between that question of why, you know, what's the request? What is the handicap they're getting at? And then also what's the concern from Mr. Gleason, right? That they had when they built it, when they made it. What is that? That's what I'd like to know. So with the original one, they were transferring density from the valley floor up to the ski resort. And those calculations were based upon it. And where they're changing the commercial definition, that is a bit different. But they are changing the hotel definition, which is probably a little more restrictive, but it's actually helpful because it's consistent with what we did with Powder Mountain. So you have similarities that happened at Powder Mountain that will be happening here at Snowbasin.
Maybe you could tell us again what staff recommends.
Yeah, so I want to just point out again, as each development, as each area is developed, the county, it does say we're allowed to approve or deny development plans, and they come in based on the concept plans. And so I get that there is this worry of that they can do whatever they want. Well, that's not really true. They still have to follow their development plans. They're still going to have to get a development plan approved. Sorry, what was your question, Commissioner Lewis?
Well, what, after staff looked at all this,
Oh.
what was your recommendation?
Yes, and then let me point out the last, I guess the one more thing I wanted to point out with this change is they're proposing a more specific plan for Area A. Let's zoom out. This is, and it's a little hard to look at, if you don't know exactly where this is, but yeah, north, in this case is the top of the screen. This was the original Area A. You can see the uses are they're colored differently. You've got most of it's multifamily, mixed use. Here is what's being proposed as a more specific plan for Area A. I just wanted to point this out. This is one of the, I don't know that it's a change, but they're really just following the existing development agreement and presenting this to you. North is now it's on the left, could be on the left side of the screen. So you do see still a lot of mixed use. This is kind of the long-term plan. And then if you look down here, this is ideally what they'd like to complete in the next few years. So this is an example of, they'll have to do this again when they develop Area B, F, and G. And they'll also have to show us this, and that they're complying with this when they submit subdivision applications that you will see. Also commercial design review applications that you'll see. The staff recommendation on these changes to limit the cap, to specify hotel density, staff recommends approval of the proposed changes and the proposed amendment to the development agreement. And I will say there probably will be a little bit more back and forth on the specifics of the language as we go to the county commission. Generally, development agreements are only taken to the county commission. We did want your input as the planning commission, so we'll go to the county commission. I just want to mention there may be a few slight changes before it goes to the county commission.
So to kind of reiterate. Request, so commercial, just to make sure, everything's on the table, commercial, hotel is considered a commercial space. Originally, the intent of the 1 to 5,000 was to say, hey, this is the kind of a requirement of density for including hotels. But we're kind of saying that way anymore. We're going to put a separate, that way there's no confusion with retail commercial type application where they're requiring that. And we're going to do a separate that says like, okay, but in hotels, it's 0.3 units count in each room. So it's kind of like we're saying, okay, now we're going to separate the two because they were lumped into one as a hotel. And now we're going to go remove that restriction, which is difficult to do in a retail space, retail. And we're going to go to kind of valley standard of 0.3 unit hotels. So we're asking for that condition kind of thing. Hotel with the commercial just being eliminated so they can put their shops. Fit their needs.
Yes.
Because I really do think 5,000 is big for retail. So they're going to end up with, 1,000-foot small little shops. And if we don't do anything, they could put, 5 of those in and only count as 1 unit. So it's really not that great for them. But it does give them flexibility to do a bunch of little ones, which is maybe more economically viable. It takes the cap off the hotels, which, they want. And it sounds to me like they think that's what it takes to be more viable. Right.
The bottom line is they gotta be viable, but there's an asset there. They gotta be viable, and they're in the position to make the best decisions on what's gonna make them viable.
Could you tell me, or could Mr. Hotel us, what is the employee housing that's Mr. Gleason mentioned that's already existing up there? And how much?
From a staff perspective, and I think Jim probably can answer this better than I could, but there are like seasonal yurts up there. I think that's what he mentioned. There are, I think, a couple of temporary trailers that are up there as well, for like I guess the ski patrol, whoever needs to be up there full time in the winter. I don't know if you have.
What I would consider like activity for like housing. We have a former hill house area that's been changed around. There's stuff related to like the ski patrol and some of the stuff they use for like ambulance patrol.
Again, Ron Gleason, Eden, as Mr. Hill mentioned, in that there was a large structure up there in the Area A, which was referred to as a Hill House at one point, is left over from Hill Air Force Base. That was replaced a couple of years ago with a set of a couple manufactured homes. And I don't know the exact number of bedrooms, but there are bedrooms and living facilities there that ski patrol, mechanics, and food and beverage people have utilized over the years, both seasonally and also full-time. There's also an apartment on the Strawberry side in there, which is also used at times temporarily or seasonally, or in some cases, I know of one which has been there full-time.
So I can speak to that from a staff perspective. It's just a general consensus with Snowbasin that these are temporary. Obviously, there's no. I mean, these units wouldn't count towards their workforce housing, but it's more until Snowbasin actually decides to develop. We understand that they might need a few people to actually live up there, and so yeah, there have been a few manufactured homes and yurts approved up there for those purposes.
That's the yurt question. Is there code, or would we need to address that in staff bill?
So there is something in the code. Let me share my screen for you. Got it's going to be a list of uses that are allowed in the DRR1 zone, the Destination Recreation Resort Zone. And yurt is one of them that's just listed as permitted. I can look. I don't know that we specifically define yurt, but in these areas, so specifically in Snowbasin and Powder Mountain, yurts are permitted.
Okay, and so could they count possibly as units? Like when you go to Africa or whatever, they're like hotels out in, when you go on a safari or whatever. So I just was wondering.
So we see yurts as temporary, so that they're not. We don't count them towards units because they are, unless the Snowbasin and Powder Mountain were to come to us and say we want a temporary, we want a permanent, full-time yurt village, and then at that point we'd say, okay, we probably need to count these toward your units, but currently they're not. They're an example would be up at Powder Mountain. They have yurts for cat skiing. It's a permitted use, so we allow the yurts. It's also temporary because where they put the yurts would be a hotel maybe 20 years down the road.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Okay, we'll go ahead and accept the motion.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to the county commission regarding ZDA 2021-02 based upon the findings in the staff report.
Okay, do I have a second? Any discussion? Okay,
I was on the board here in 2011, and I remember the Holden Group hired a concern out of Denver, Colorado, who made a 4-year study of the area of sensitive lands, trails, environment, etc., footprint of Snowbasin and the building plans, and which were accepted at that time.
okay, any other comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Okay, we're going to go on to our next agenda item, 3.2 ZDA 2019-3, consideration and action on a zoning text amendment to add the Eden mixed-use village zoning to the county land use code. Steve and Charlie are both presenting on this.
Hello again. I just want to say that that last discussion I think was really helpful. I think it needed to be had just because we haven't really talked about this in 10 years. I wonder what the discussion looked like when it was adopted, if everybody was able to make sense of how the units were calculated. So I think it was a good discussion. Thank you for your feedback and your questions. I think it was necessary. Let's see. I'm sorry that you have to sit through me talking again, but this is the Eden Mixed Use Village. We talked to you a few times about it. So we've scheduled it as this will be the first public hearing. We've sent out notice to the paper, published on the state notice website, published on our own website as required by state code. So let me share my screen here. So as I just want to point out a few things kind of as a reminder, and I don't know, if anyone from the public has been following this over the last 3 years, but in 2018, the planning division started this process to adopt an area plan for the Eden villages. The Ogden Valley General Plan from 2016 talks about a few of these villages or nodes, which basically are the plan would be to have them be mixed use. So you'd have retail on the bottom and you potentially have residences above the top. Now it wouldn't be like high density, like condominium residences. It would be like kind of like the live work situation that you see in some resort areas where you've got people who work in the retail below it. So I think that's important to think about as we're talking about these changes, proposed changes. And in the general plan, it talks about developing this kind of these main street villages where people can walk and go across the street to the park. They can go take care of their shopping needs, kind of like you see really in a lot of main streets. So what we did is, as staff, Charlie and myself, we met with and contacted a group of people that own commercial property in the Old Town Eden area, and we let them know that we'd like them to be on this what we call a steering committee, so that they can provide us feedback on what they'd like to see these area plans look like. So the feedback that we got was, specifically in Old Town Eden is we want these areas to look like the build out to look similar to the blacksmith shop and the general store. And what we found was that is the specific architecture there is the dates are late 1890s to early 1910s. So you've got like the brick storefront, or you've got kind of the wood, false front building. With sometimes you've got like steel. You'll notice the blacksmith shop has a steel element to it. So we brought back. Maybe I'll just show that to you here. Since this is the first public hearing on this, if you're okay with it, we probably will go into pretty good detail, but you can let me know if you want me just to kind of keep it to bullet points. But first public hearing, we've got people here. It would be nice to show them how we really plan this out. So we met with stakeholders steering committee in 2018, actually a few times at the end of 2018, and met with them. And this basically is what we heard back from them. And I apologize, planning commissioners, you've seen this probably several times. So I guess would be more for the benefit of anybody here from the public. If you've walked through any of those areas right now, you'll notice that they're not really pedestrian friendly. You think of gas station, right? People there's multiple entrances. You got cars coming in, so it's really focused on the automobile, not necessarily on the cyclist or the pedestrian, which we all know there's safety concerns there, but also visibility and actually getting people that want to be there. So we want what we heard from the steering committee and what we know from our profession as planners is wide sidewalks make sense. That's a place that people want to be, but wide sidewalks with things like trees, pathways for cyclists. You could potentially have street art that make it just kind of a vibrant area. Street signage, even street lighting. In a village area, you obviously need a public space. That's why Old Town Eden is kind of perfect for that. It's right by the park. It's got the park right in the center of it. Now, I'll walk you through I'll try to do this as briefly as I can, but Charlie put together a Photoshop of kind of what it currently looks like, which is again what I was talking about a minute ago. Not super walkable, not really pedestrian friendly. Although over here you can see it is. It's just that currently nothing lines up with that. So I'm going to scroll through some of these. You can see just as we go the changes right here. You've got some traffic calming as you've got people walking through. It makes sense to do what we call street bulb outs, traffic calming measures that just make people slow down. Visually, they're going to see the pinch point and slow down cars specifically. You could have a raised median there as well. That helps with that visibility. You're starting to see some sidewalks on both sides. It's not something we see a ton of on the Ogden Valley just because a lot of it's not developed yet. Okay, so here's our really wide commercial area, sidewalk area. Later I'll walk you through what we envision that width to be. Start to see more people just to kind of show you what it'll look like here. You got street lights, you've got pathway for cyclists. On-street parking, we feel that that's necessary. we think you could either do parallel parking or angled parking like it's shown here. Also, you might have noticed curb and gutter would be here. It provides a little bit of a buffer as well to pedestrians and cyclists from the cars. Here's what it's starting to look like at more full build out. You got trees. You've got pedestrians that probably feel a little bit safer. Visually it looks nice. It's got a nice aesthetic to it. There's kind of what it would look like with cars not parked there. So that's how it could change with this ordinance. Basically, I just kind of wanted to show you what we call form-based code, which focuses on the street and the way the buildings look instead of focuses on the uses, and instead of focusing on, you need X number of parking spaces. Let's just focus on the way the buildings look and how the street looks. So I'm going to stop sharing there. We have a picture of what it would look like from the other street, but it looks generally the same. Any questions before I continue? Yeah, one nice thing about a lot of these areas being undeveloped is when they do come into develop, and when we have this plan, we can point them to our cross section, which will probably be somewhere between like 110 feet wide or 117 feet wide in order to accommodate for that wide of a right of way. But you're right, currently with the existing right of way, we don't have that. Yeah. So if it's a requirement for them to dedicate room, then there will be enough room. And that's the intent of this ordinance, is to say, currently we understand that we only have 890 or 100 feet wide, but if you'd like to develop your property this way, you're going to have to dedicate more areas so that we can make this happen. Closes.
Steve, could you pull up the picture number 30, please?
Number them?
I think it was
page?
30 right now.
Okay, yeah, let me.
It's 30 out of 69. I think. Scroll down where you show the cars there and the parking.
Oh, with cars
With cars and parking.
right here.
Okay. General plan talks about we're rural. We want to preserve farms. This is the main road between Liberty and Huntsville. This is the way you can get there. I don't see how farm implements can go down this road.
So the general plan does,
They
it also
just can't do it.
but it also does talk about these village areas. And I would argue that need on-street parking. So I think the response to that is we understand that there's going to have to be a separate route specifically for farm
Without a
implements.
bypass.
Yeah, and we have a regulating plan. I think Charlie's going to show it to you, but it does have a separate path and a separate route for those, so that they don't have to worry about going through these narrow spaces.
Does that go through the residential area to the east of this,
I don't know.
east of the park?
I don't know. We'll have to, I guess what I'm saying is, and unless we want to answer that right now, I think we're willing to answer it here in a minute when we look at the regulating plan.
Is it premature to adopt an ordinance that ends up with something like this when we know it won't work for farm implements?
What I'm saying is we have planned for it to work for farm implements, just on a different road.
Would that be for the general public to use that road?
Yeah, anybody would be able
Yeah,
to
because
use it.
like right now, this is a main thoroughfare for Valley residents. Say you live in Liberty to go to Huntsville or Mountain Green or whatever. This is a 40-mile-an-hour road right now currently. This is going to drop it down to 25. I'm sure it's going to be congested and everything else. So if there is I'd like to see that as well.
Do you want to look at it now, Charlie?
As I'm thinking about the comparison in Ogden here is 25th Street, lower 25th Street with angled parking, narrow lanes. You can't drive a tractor pulling there.
Yeah, and no farmer would, right?
Oh, well, you can't do it. Impossible.
That's the plan. Yeah. Yeah, under today's circumstances, no, this wouldn't make sense. We'd have to plan for other roads, and we're not thinking that this will happen tomorrow. But we want to be able to have this happen when a developer comes in and would like to use this village area to potentially get their business there, and also maybe residents above it.
We're just trying to make.
I'm thinking the Cisco truck, how does he get through there? And he's going to service all these restaurants. So if this concept plan were a block away off to the side, no problem. But it's the main road.
Never mind. Yeah, good question. So if you look in the document you have, this is a placeholder here. You guys saw this in the last presentation we did in our work session. The line that's right down the middle, that's the road we're talking about. Now, it's important to understand that obviously this isn't going to happen overnight at all. In fact, we're going to get one business, then another business, another business, another business. How are we even going to fund this? That's one primary question we haven't resolved. But we're working with economic development. We know we've got tax increment financing options, and I don't think there's any way, like the park side, for example, the park side of that street right there. I don't think anyone's going to be moving that canal over, because the canal's going to need to be moved. You know that there's not enough space there, so it'll need to be moved. Maybe it needs to be piped. We're not quite sure yet. We won't know until we get an engineer up there and design that roadway. So the county's going to need to design the roadway for the capacity that the county wants it to be designed for. Now, if that capacity is like 25th Street, you can be assured you're not going to get a 25th Street in the next 10 years. It's just not possible. You're not going to see that kind of economy boom that quickly. And if we do see a 25th Street in the next 10 years, that's when we start looking at these alternative routes that we've got another way around. If you just drive down 25th Street, we're talking about, right now, we're talking about 2 blocks from here to here. So maybe on the way, well, tonight's probably not a good time, but maybe on a Saturday evening, just drive down 25th Street, drive 2 blocks and time yourself. And then ask yourself, when you're done timing yourself, whether or not it's worth the wait of that time frame. So time, and then go up here and time yourself, just drive at least 2 blocks, and then take the difference. And we're talking about a matter of a couple of minutes, if even. And that's when the road is as busy as 25th Street. Again, we're not going to see that for 10, 15 years down the road. We need a place to launch. We need a starting place. And until we have a plan put together and a general basic cross section of what we're hoping for, we're never even going to be able to get an engineer to look at it, let alone put together financing to at least finance the county side of it. We also know we're probably not going to get a lot of success out of these village zones until we get a sewer system in that area. So as we look at how much traffic is in that picture, I mean, that's full build out. And that's at the point that you get to full build out, you're definitely going to want to have some kind of a side route or a route that goes around. In the meantime, however, the facility will need to be built so that everyone who's using it now can use it. There is an alternative route currently up there. It does run through a residential area. It doesn't mean that's the area that we're going to emphasize people use. But as this starts to grow, there is going to be a period of time when it's a little more challenging to get through there. A traffic engineer isn't going to suggest we need to look at another route or improving another route until we get to a certain threshold. UDOT grades their streets, and we will do somewhat similar. A, B, C, D, E, F, F being failing, D being we need to start looking at this, C being you're probably still okay, even though you've got to wait a minute or two to get out onto this roadway. That's actually the threshold. When somebody says, I want a traffic study because I think this is going to bring too much traffic, the standard of, I think we need new improvements here is 2 minutes. What if you have to wait 2 minutes on average to get out onto that roadway? That's a long time. And that's 2 red lights. So
Charlie, the alternate route here is the part that you're considering changing or restricting with this new ordinance.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, the alternate route there, where's what in this picture you have up here? What area of this picture does the new ordinance intended to apply? There's Eden Park. The block to the north of that is going to be part of this new ordinance area. Is that correct?
This block here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the alternate route is right on the north side of that.
You mean right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So think about this in terms of phasing. This isn't going to be everybody gets the village zone. This is going to be village zone should be start fairly organically. Now, everybody who currently has commercial zoning can get the village zoning, and we don't know for sure. We've got to create the ordinance so that we know that before we can rezoning one, but we don't know for sure what the county commission is going to want when it comes to actually applying the zone. We're going to suggest you just take everyone who has a CV zone and apply it to the property. But the commission may say, nah, we're going to wait for them to ask us to apply to the property, which is just fine. And so that'll actually set just a little bit of a timing factor on there. And as you look at this, this is the area. So I've got a phasing plan that will be produced. And it is this stretch right here and this stretch right here that is the stretch we're going to focus on right now. And the reason for that is because that weird little shaped piece right there, that's currently zone CV2. That's the furthest west that CV2 goes. This piece of property right here, right there, is zone CV2. Going around the bend, that's the furthest extent of the CV2 over there. And then there is a property over here that's also CV2. Now, if you look at this alternative route, the route is actually over here and then cuts across. Now, that's the one that exists. And I'm not suggesting that that be the one that's emphasized as the one that all the truck traffic and farming traffic and everything uses in the future. I am suggesting that if this stretch is debilitated for whatever reason, car accident, parade, or whatever, there is currently an alternative route, and so there are options, and options are important. But the other suggestion is as this grows outward, so from the center here, up, down, out, and out, as that reaches full build out, full rezone with full proposal on from those landowners on getting commercial zoning out of there. Then we look outside of that. We look at the next block over or the next block down, or maybe even the next block up. But if you look at the regulating plan that we've created, even this block here is more, is less retail, street-oriented retail. It's actually a little bit more residential in nature. Higher density residential with transfers. So you'd only be able to get the higher density in there if you actually transfer units in. Okay? And so we still wouldn't even emphasize this route or this route for the long term. If you're looking at the main highways that comes down here and around, the emphasis would be in the future taking a route around this way. Now, again, if creating this village isn't successful, we're not even need to look at that. Maybe we're moderately successful and you get a few more cars on the road. Moderate, maybe even simple successful. But if we're very successful, that is going to trigger the need for expansion. It's going to trigger the need for alternatives. This gentleman who owns all this land right here does not want to develop currently. In fact, he's a little shy about having this road on here. And so when we have our plan together, when it comes to, so when somebody wants to rezone the property, we're going to look to see what the plan says. Do we want to rezone this or recreate this area as a street-oriented retail or higher density residential with transfers? Do we want to see that, or do we want to see open spaces? In the plan itself, we'll list this property here specifically at the owner's request as not intended for future development unless this gets really popular and the property owner chooses to develop. So if the property owner then chooses to develop, then at that point we'd be looking at the possibility of making connections and just creating that grid as development gets popular. Again, I'm thinking 50 years and 100 years from now. I'm talking about 5 years or even 10 years from now. The farm. Yep. Yeah, and really the hope is that farm is wildly successful and acts as a little bit of an anchor. Because the other issue that you're going to have with this village, as well as with the four-way intersection, is you don't have an anchor in either location. The four-way intersection has a grocery store, but you still have the majority of your shoppers leaving the valley because they're already leaving the valley for other errands. They're shopping somewhere else. Okay, and your grocery store can be a little bit of an anchor for a village, or excuse me, for a neighborhood-oriented services area, but if we're all relying on the resorts to be an anchor to draw people up here, it's now that resorts are doing their own thing, and they're hoping to be their own anchors. So, in order for this to be successful, there needs to be some niche that this is going to serve to. Again, serving to active traveling tourists or the transient valley users, that's fine. I mean, people coming right off the lake, people coming down from Nordic, people who are using the backcountry. I think this could be its own thing where it does attract that kind of attention. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at shoulder seasons, you're just not going to get longevity of businesses here without some kind of anchor. So, and the hope is the farm is that anchor.
Looking at this,
Not necessarily. So we don't have the standards.
it's already done.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Can somebody do this voluntarily? Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So proposing this change is more or less a requirement that in future development similar in a similar style.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a change.
Right.
You've been working with the landowner.
Yeah, and I can't say we've got 100% landowner consensus. We haven't got surveyed.
What are their major sticking points?
Well, so we had stakeholders, and everything that we have here is listed from that bullet point list from what the stakeholders gave us. So we asked the stakeholders what they want,
How many
and
stakeholders?
they gave us a list. 7, 8 people. I think our first meeting we actually had more than that because some of the stakeholders brought folks that they just brought friends around. So yeah, and these folks were landowners. They were business owners, people who have other vested interests in the area.
So did they have any concerns with this?
Going in this direction? No, no. In fact, they unanimously wanted to go in this direction.
These are undeveloped.
That's right.
A lot of burden on them. Be the ones putting-
The undeveloped property owners. Well, so finances are going to have to show that it's feasible, right? So one of these
Right, but
landowners,
currently they could do some kind of commercial development that doesn't require all the
That's right.
front space, all the stuff we're putting in.
you got it.
And I guess my question is, these landowners in that, a lot of them is undeveloped landowners. They didn't have any concerns with this?
Haven't knocked on all the doors. And especially for the undeveloped areas. Well, in the area and the properties that have residences, current residences. Now they'll be grandfathered. They'll be able to stay as they are as long as they want to stay. In fact, our ordinances allow them to expand and get additional permits and stuff like that on the property without coming into compliance. But when they're ready to change the use from residential to commercial, that's when they would need to come into compliance with this. Our CB2 zone does currently talk about street-oriented retail and zero front setbacks, but it doesn't require it.
So when the blacksmith shop was renovated, that area was developed. The owner of the property came to the county and said, this is what I want to voluntarily do with my property. And then it happened. And now a few, but not all of landowners came and said, yeah, we like the blacksmith shop. Let's make everybody be like the blacksmith shop. So that's the genesis of this proposed ordinance. Do I understand it correctly?
I
That
can't,
some neighbors
say
are
that.
saying, we want everything to look like the blacksmith shop. So we want to force our neighbors to look like the blacksmith shop, even though they might have a different idea of how their property ought to look.
A lot of this came from the general plan. This is why we're doing this, is because the general plan with the public input, they requested this.
Yeah, so I can't say that how you've represented it is the case at all. In fact, we're moving off of what the general plan says at the direction of the county commission, moving towards implementation of that general plan.
Hey, Charlie, I apologize. I have to go pick up my wife at the airport, so I'm gonna
No
turn
apology
this over to
necessary.
Shannon. But before I leave, I wanted to just throw my input into this. I know a lot of people have concerns over, making this a general plan or a general rule, but my honest opinion of this is you guys have done a really good job trying to pull together some kind of direction as opposed to no direction at all. And I'm worried in the future, if we are going to have villages, if you don't have some kind of direction, and if you just rely on volunteer, then you very likely will end up with what we have at the other intersection, where you have cabins next to log cabins next to an old wooden cool looking building, but next to a modern building, next to a Maverick, there's nothing charming about that. And we have a chance now, and it's tough to do, but we have a chance right now to put a direction out there that hopefully 20 years from now lands something similar. Even if it gets changed and tweaked, at least you've got a mechanism to try to pull people together to have something common and interesting and beautiful. But I'm really worried if you don't do something form-based, you can end up with really great independent, individually interesting things that will look completely scattered. And that's not going to help everybody's value. And I don't think that's what the general consensus asked you to do in the first place. I think you're right that they wanted some kind of, direction to stick to.
Yeah,
So,
the general plan that says the same.
Yeah.
Yep.
all right, best of luck, everybody.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
So along that line, is there a way to incentivize
Yes,
people doing this rather than
absolutely.
eliminating all other options?
So the intention that we have right now is to work with the county commission. I have a hard time saying we should go and tell a landowner who may not have a lot of capital that they've got to put, a couple $1 million into infrastructure before they even start building the building. That's a lot. But we want to work with the county commission to create a tax increment finance system for this area. Right now, we're talking about a commercial development. Well, they used to be called commercial development areas. Do you remember what they're called now? URAs or URA? Anyway, basically how that works is you got your piece of property and maybe you're paying $2,000 a year on this property. Just case. And it's you got a house on it right now. If your property is changed to this zone, you can get the commercial village outcome from it. The value of your property after you've developed it as in a commercial matter goes up so much more that you're paying that extra. So from $2,000 to maybe you're paying $7,000 or $8,000 or more than that actually. So let's just $2,000 to, let's just say it's $10,000. That $8,000 difference can be used to reinvest in that community. Now, every tax increment finance system needs to have a sunset date. The Powder Mountain development, I believe, is that 20 years or is that 10 years? Do you recall? Which is really long. That's a long payback time. And in Powder Mountain, the county floated a bond to do that. So the county funded the road, and the county's getting paid back through that increment financing. So as those assessments of each of those properties go sky high, at least compared to how they were before, just vacant land, every dollar of that essentially gets reinvested, or a portion of the dollars. I actually think Powder Mountain had like 89%. Gets reinvested into paying back what the county funded. I see it working similar here. In fact, I don't see any way to do it otherwise. Sewer system, street system, drainage system. We've got a pretty decent water system, so we're okay there. Those three things, without those, you're just not going to get this village to succeed. And I don't see those three things happening unless the county takes the reins and invests in the property and gets paid back through tax increment financing. And we could also do it with impact fees and stuff like that and pay back that way. But I see a special assessment area.
The thrust in the valley has always been to keep it a rural atmosphere. I mean, everybody I've been up for 40 years, like.
Yep, that's exactly the point. So you look at this little area, these maybe 2, 3, 4 blocks. If you can take the vast majority of the density off of the farmland, off of the benches, and move it into here. So the only way you're going to get housing units in here is if you move them in, unless you already have a density right in here. You move them into this area, you keep everything else rural. I mean, that's maximum success is nothing gets built anywhere else and everything gets built here. Now, we're not going to reach maximum success because we're probably not going to mandate that nobody else can build, right? They can only transfer. But incentivizing it, creating the option.
Box stores up there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, nobody wants the big box stores either. Yeah, or used car lots. That's right. So the ideal would be to try and concentrate people right here. The thing that concentration of people does isn't just moves it off the inside and puts it in here. What it also does is it actually creates a local economy where a coffee shop can exist. And I'm just going to use the coffee shop as the general trope here, but I mean, whether it be a coffee shop or a coffee shop, the hair cutting shop or a nail salon, none of those can exist without rooftops.
Where are we with TDRs? 'Cause I didn't
Coming?
see anything of that in here.
Yeah, coming. So in the proposal, we were light on TDRs because we just don't have it ready yet. And so when you look at what residences, or residential uses are going to be allowed in here, it basically says with TDRs at a time that the county has adopted a TDR ordinance. So if somebody tomorrow comes in and says, we want to do mixed, well, let's just say tomorrow after it's all adopted, we want to do some kind of a mixed use commercial with street-oriented commercial on the ground floor, and then some residential up on top. Well, today we don't have, or on that day we wouldn't have a TDR program. However, we still have the ability to do TDRs. We've already done one through an accessory dwelling unit. You guys are going to see something next month. It's essentially just a rezone on Powder Mountain Road, and not Powder Mountain, where somebody's got 40 acres and they're going to ask for a different zone than the F40 zone. And they are going to transfer every single one of their units that they don't already have on the mountainside in the 40-acre zone into it. And so their goal is to come here, ask for that zone, have a development agreement, say that, let's say their base units on those 40 acres, let's say they can get 10 actually. They've got more than 40 acres. They're in the 40 acre zone. So I think they have like 7 or 8 units that they can get out of the property. in the 40 acre zone. And so they want to do little condos because they want to package it right in there real tight because a lot of it's
So I guess following up on something you mentioned, I want to clarify, we talked about, so this becoming another mixed use zone. I guess this still leaves the question as to whether or not we're going to implement or we're going to recommend an implementation that all commercial in certain areas become mixed village mixed use, or we're just going to let them choose to stay as a regular commercial. Kind of, I guess it somewhat defeats the purpose, right? Let's speak to that a little bit more. Because it's like, well, if I'm
having a choice versus
yeah, so I'm a property 5600 east or whatever. That we allow this to come to fruition, you know, this is good. Do I have the choice to stay as commercial as I already am, or go to this? Is that a question for another day?
that will be a question for another day. So we've got to have an ordinance to rezone those properties to first. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, creation of the ordinance. Once the ordinance is created, then we need to apply it to properties.
So we're not actually enforcing this right now. The question isn't that. The question is, do you guys want to create it? Then later the question will be asked, do we want to enforce it?
And the county has a couple of zones on the books right now that aren't applied to any property. They just have to go to in case somebody asks for it.
I'll also say we do actually have, I know of one person I've spoken with in the last few weeks that is waiting for this to be adopted so that they can propose to change their property to this zone.
Yeah, and I've actually talked to a couple other landowners in the area.
Certainly.
Steve, could that person do what he wants to do now without this zone?
I don't know actually what they want to do. I think from my conversations with them is it's more marketable to have it be an actual mixed use village zone. It allows for residential above it, but I don't know the specific use that they want to do.
Is that person waiting for the TDRs, or are they waiting for this?
I doubt that they're waiting for TDRs. This does allow, I think the CB2 zone allows like a night watchman type of a facility where if you have a use that needs, security there, you can live there. But I don't think this person's waiting on TDRs. I think their primary goal is to get it to be commercially. And sorry, I can't answer your question, Commissioner Burton. They're currently zoned AV3, so they can't do what they want to do with their property yet. They want to go from AV3 to this mixed use zone.
Okay, thank you.
And as far as TDRs go, if they're waiting for TDRs and they get the zone, let's say they get the zone tomorrow and they come to us and they say, we want to do residential above, we would work on a development. So just because we don't have an ordinance in place right now that says that explains how to do TDRs doesn't mean that we can't do it some kind of an agreement where they are moving them in, where essentially we do the same thing we do with ADUs. We would essentially record a covenant to that property that says they sold, and record a covenant to this property saying they received.
So is there, mixed use could be in some areas without requiring 1880s mining town colors and building facades and things like that.
Yep.
Okay. So if the concern is mixed use, why do we have to require it to look like the 1880s?
It gives an architectural style.
Look at Park City, for example. I mean, all of Park City looks very similar. It's very attractive.
Except for one building.
Except for one building.
It
Are you talking about the
sticks.
blue roof building?
No, it's the very modern looking. Well, it was modern in the 80s. It just sticks out like a sore thumb.
But what it does is it helps guide the hand of developers to create a somewhat uniform look in the valley, and so that you don't end up with the Wild West out there, where you've got a modern building here, a rustic building here, and there's just no rhyme or reason to the village area.
Kind of want Wild West.
Wild West.
But I think something in place helps
guide the hand where we're not just building whatever we want.
Yeah.
If you're a developer.
And that's what we heard from the steering committee is what I heard was we want to set a higher standard. We don't want someone to come in and do split-faced CMU buildings because you could do that under the current code. And what we heard from what we know as planners is just what Commissioner Torman just said. It makes it look better. It makes people want to be there. It's almost like I don't know if I'd say like kitschy, but it gives a specific feel. Some of these buildings, I mean, they don't all have to be identical. That's not what we want at all. We want them to look different. And some of these, like maybe this over here, don't look at because it looks like it's stucco, but yeah, something. And I think a lot of these are like resort towns in like Montana, but they, and I know currently they have ordinances that require buildings to look this way. But we do want some diversity in how they look.
And again, we have to go back to the general plan. And just because these folks said they want that, the whole entire valley said they wanted this, because that's what our general plan says. So your obligation is to enforce the general plan. And while you may not agree with certain things, this is what the public asked for. So that's why we're doing this, is because the general plan calls for this.
It's a great idea.
So to put myself in the proper place, even though I understand the entire valley population didn't want the general plan, the specifics. Because the general plan exists, it's the planning commission duty to move the general plan forward.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I'll say as well, I don't know how long it took to adopt the 2016 general plan, but we've been working on this and have been having open public meetings on this for 3 years. So anyone who does not want this, well, it is definitely welcome to come, and we're happy to listen. But we really, like I think Charlie said, we can't speak for everyone, but we haven't heard no to this.
When we go to do whether we force this or we don't force this meeting, is that a public meeting? Okay,
So there will be,
so in reality, what we're talking here is we were looking for input and we're saying, should we create this? Seems
I like to think of it as just giving the government another tool, and actually giving owners another tool to use. I think you can almost look at it like a conditional use permit. So with a conditional use permit, it obviously there's a use that's going to require us to look at something. We want to make sure that our standards are think of short-term rentals, or think of a wedding reception center that is required to come in and get a conditional use permit. This planning commission has used that as a tool to even, I would say, to heavily restrict, or in certain cases deny, to say that it doesn't actually meet your standard. It doesn't meet the Ogden Valley standard. And what we're saying is, with the general plan, I don't know how many public meetings we've had, close to 10 probably. We've heard that this should be the standard. So, but obviously we don't speak for everyone.
Comments for staff.
So as I said, the only complaint that we've had so far is, gosh, if only we can get less housing in there. But again, it's the question of, do you want less housing on the hillside, or do you want in exchange for here, or do you want to see
who
it
made
spread
that
out?
comment? Was it a property owner?
It was a
In
property
this space that you're talking
in
about,
this
Darren?
particular, well, just outside of this particular area. They wanted to see just a little bit less density proposed. But again, we're not actually proposing any density. We haven't hit a cap, and we haven't set a bottom on this. It'll be completely whatever the market allows for.
Okay, any further questions? Motion? Someone want to propose that?
I'll propose the motion to open the public comment.
We need to vote on the motion. So there was a excuse me, a motion, and I believe Commissioner Howell, did Commissioner Howell second? Okay, so there needs to be a vote.
Any opposed? Okay, we're now in a public hearing. And it doesn't look like I see anyone from the audience who wants to address this. And this is interesting because we did advertise it. So it doesn't seem like a real hot people with concerns. So do we have anybody raising their hands? Hey,
Langford speaking. I'd like to raise my hand, but I can't figure out how to do it.
okay. Mr. Langford, would you go ahead?
So I'd just like to make a couple comments.
I'm sorry, really quick. Would you state where you're from?
I'm sorry, Kirk Langford, Eden, Utah. I live a short distance from this area. And I've had some chance to meet with some stakeholders and the planners. Thank you very much. I share some reservation about this type of density, but a bigger concern is that we don't provide guidelines or direction. And that hurts everybody's private property rights, and it hurts the economic development of our community. And we need some architectural guidelines, not to restrict people or tell them what they have to do, but to provide a sense of community and to give people who are investors or landowners some visual direction. And, you know, we worked on the general plan for, you know, many years. And if you go back even to 98, when we did the first plan, there's been a huge amount of people turn out in the valley. And the general plan we did in 2016, my recollection is the consultants who'd been doing this for 25 or 30 years literally had more turnout, not just turnout per capita, but more turnout in Ogden Valley than they'd had on other projects they worked, even with, you know, multi-thousands of people living there. So the general plan is really, not everybody agreed with it, but it isn't a close call, 51-49. It was something that got passed with a lot of work and a lot of smart people and a lot of energy. And there's a lot of consensus there. And I really think that while this isn't perfect, you're going in the right direction. And to provide some kind of, you know, architectural guidelines for the valley. Otherwise, this is going to end up like no zoning at all, which is out in Layton on Hillfield Road, just west of the freeway. And that's not going to be good for anybody in Ogden Valley. So I think, you know, there's some devil in the details. What's the density? How do you use the TDRs? You know, people shouldn't be forced to do everything exactly the same way. But the worst situation, if people move into town here and start proposing poor projects that ruin everybody else's private property rights and don't help us build out according to the general plan. I think that's a huge danger. And for that reason, I think there's not a whole lot of alternative other than to accept this so we can get some vision going and some architectural guidelines and move in the direction of the general plan. Thank you.
Mr. Langford? Any other comments from the public? Okay. I would just like to comment along the lines of Mr. Langford. In this area, find an investor. There's one on the park for someone, you don't have any guidelines. Others that come in. You have no. Having some guidelines is a good idea.
You want to close the public hearing?
So. Motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
A second.
I'll second.
A motion by Commissioner Burton and a close, second by Schuman. All in favor? Have any other questions for staff or?
Assuming this gets approved, when would we start looking at whether or not we would start enforcing this as a zone or implementing or requiring that kind of thing,
So
timeline wise?
yeah, so we would take our direction from the county commission. The county commission said, hey, we want you to do an entire rezone of this area. They're able to do that. They're able to actually rezone people's property. But
And they can do that without public. Is that what you're saying?
no, they need to have a public hearing, and it needs to be a legislative open process for that. So they would need to have a public hearing for that. But if things go how we think it will go, it will likely be, I think it'll actually be a little bit of both. So what we'll see is see these individuals who have approached us and are saying, hey, we'd like this zone. We'll likely rezone them from AB3 to this new mixed use zone. There are a few commercial zones right now as well. CV2, I think, is in this area. They may come in and say that they want to use this as well after they see what a couple other people have done. But I think the answer is it really depends on the direction we get from the county commissioners.
Additional questions? See none, would someone like to make a motion on ZTA 2019-03?
Make a motion. Correctly. I'll make a motion to approve file number ZTA 2019-03. Public hearing to reconsider and make recognition of new ordinance for the Eden mixed use zoning regulations that we as a planning commission approve the new ordinance, that make recommendation that we do make a new ordinance in the mixed use zone with all of the findings and staff.
Second. Commissioner Howe seconds. Commissioner Schuman's motion. Any other discussion? Favor?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We have one dissent.
I dissent, and I want to explain. It's based on my concern about transportation issues. And also that things are too specific here. There can be mixed use without restricting the aesthetics to 1880s or whatever. I think mixed use, okay, that's great. That ought to be an option in the valley. Restricting the very specifics that are in this proposed ordinance are not required for the health, safety, and welfare of the public. They're aesthetic. Somebody prefers this style as opposed to that style, but there isn't a good or bad style. So that's the reason for my dissent. Thank you.
Okay. A few comments. All right, are there any other public comments from the audience, no audience, or from our viewers that are not on the agenda?
I have to ask the question, what Burton's comments make of architecture design kind of general plan.
Steve, you may want to address that, but there is definitely specificities on certain areas. in the general plan.
Yeah, it actually does. It talks about the blacksmith shop, and I think it says old mine town architecture is what it specifically says. We took that wording to steering committee in 2018, and they're like, we don't really like that it says old mine town. We don't want a bunch of like general stores, I guess. But it does talk about that. And you look at that time period, that's right between what we've said 1890 and 1910.
My thoughts are that these are mostly in terms of walkway space, tree, things that are kind of public safety. So public. It's curbs and everything. The door, it's just a general idea. And as long as it's
General plan also had some specificities for Newtown Eden as well. It wasn't the mining, it was like mountain modern examples.
It's about like agrarian type, and you think you saw that in the ordinance at the last reading we had was you've got almost like a barn type agricultural type buildings in the Newtown area, but also still right up at the street front. Also some very specific architectural detail.
Thing that the
Just want to, I know you dealt with some really tough items tonight. Appreciate you delivering those the way you did. But as far as training goes, we have this requirement, not that you did anything bad tonight, don't get me wrong, but we have a requirement by state code that requires each of you to have 4 hours of training with land use code. And there's different ways it can be accomplished. It can be going to these conferences that I put out there for you. We also come to these meetings every so often and do training. And also there's a provision in the state code that says that if you attend every meeting during the year, that counts as 1 hour of training. And so there's different ways you can, get these hours, but I have to track them for each of you individually. And we'll find ways to put stuff out online. You can watch stuff as well, and you can report back to us that you watched it. And so we're going to be looking at ways, working with legal, to make sure we get stuff out there so that it's easy for you to do that and it's not a burden, because we respect your time and know that your time's valuable. But then you have this volunteer position, and state code goes in and puts this requirement in there, and so it kind of ties our hands.
on one of the off months, can we do a training by that?
We could. The problem is on those off months, we're doing something on with the other planning commission. And so we prefer to probably have it as part of our meeting, a regular meeting, so that, or we could do it on another night, but on those off months, we're meeting with the other planning commission.
That'd be done on the
It could be, yeah, we could do that as part of our work session.
I mean, I don't like coming down. But I can see it.
I like that, where, we have it part of the Zoom meeting. Portland's looking like he wants to talk.
Yeah, just one little correction to what Rick said. To get credit for 1 hour of completed training, you have to attend 12 public meetings of the planning commission within a calendar year. So not necessarily every single one. And if we have 12 plus 6, 18, I mean, you should easily fulfill that as long as you're regulated. So that takes care of one of the required hours. And yes, this was a new statute this year. It took effect May 5th, I believe is the date. So it took effect in May. So we're just kind of, I was reminded of this last week, so I brought it to Rick's attention. It's been kind of floating out there. And I know when Commissioner Torman and Commissioner Schuman were brought on board back in June, we had to come in and you have to go through at least 1 hour of training before you can even start now attending a meeting and participating. So anyway, we made sure you had that 1 hour then, but yeah, it's kind of a new thing that we're working through.
Is this annually?
Yes.
Is there any more planning conferences?
This year, no. But we will be having we'll have the spring conference. And then we'll have one of you going to the National EPA conference in San Diego. We just take the turns and that's so I'll have to look to see who's next on the docket. And then we'll have some other conferences throughout the year next year. Well, where this came in during the middle of the year, we'll just keep track of who has done it this year, and then we'll be more diligent next year. So,
We came on in June, we have to have our 4 hours by the end of the year. Is that what?
The statute isn't specific. I mean, what if somebody gets appointed December 20th, right? They have to go through 1 hour before they can participate in the planning commission meeting, but is the legislature really expecting them to get the 4 hours by the end of that? I don't know. Well, yeah, good question, right? 6 years in jail or something.
Rick, now you'll be going to the one.
No.
Take 2 hours.
No.
Oh.
There's actually not a clear consequence for failure to violate this, but it could be grounds for somebody challenging what the planning commission does. Oh, you have an untrained planning commission that makes their decision invalid or suspect. I mean, who knows what people are going to do with it, right? And the legislature may impose a penalty later. We don't know. But as of now, it's not specific as to what the
Not public action.
and just the last comment, we have pizza in the back room for you if you'd like some. So
and I guess just one more comment. Sorry. Are you moving on to remarks from legal counsel? Okay, so following up on that, it is not uncommon for the legislature to impose a requirement of some sort based on something they've heard. And if they don't feel through whatever reports they're getting that is being taken seriously, they may take a more heavy-handed approach. So we do want to comply just because that's what they've told us we need to do. But compliance may also have other benefits. If everybody around the state takes it seriously, it might satisfy people as opposed to resulting in something more onerous.